Thank you for coming. I'm going to go ahead and get us kicked off here. Hi everyone, my name is Samantha Perez. I am the Vice President and Secretary of Equality Arlington. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I know it has been I don't know about you, but it's been a long June for me, and I've been to a lot of events. We've all been to a lot of events, so thank you for finding time in your schedule for one more. I think this is going to be a really good one. I'm happy we can host something with this kind of educational value, this kind of context. You know, I love a good pride party, but it's also good to remember why we're here, why we're doing this month, who came before us, and what there still is to do. So I just want to give a couple quick shout outs before we get going. If you are on the Equality Arlington board, can you wave at us? Our board is sitting there, so it's not just me here. We're going to partner with time to run this. And then we are co-sponsored by Equality Nova, so our stars are from them there and there. Thank you all for helping spread the word, helping provide snacks, helping get things going. Our guest speaker tonight is Victor from the Rainbow History Project, and the project tracking the history of the gay rights movement. I'll let him introduce when he gets up here. But other than that, we have one more event this month. So if you are around Saturday for the Arlington Pride Fest, we will have a table there. We're going to close the month with a bang. That's going to be a good time. Where's it located? What's the name of the park?
Longbridge Park.
Longbridge Park. And it's going pretty much all day. So we will find us there, say hi, and then we will take a break. It's been a long month. Anything to declare from Equality Nova?
No, just want to say welcome everyone, and also I want to extend thanks to Clarendon Presbyterian Church for allowing us to have this event at their facility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, and with that, I think we can get started. Victor, the stage is yours. Presentations here, up and down. We'll go through the presentation. All right.
Yeah, I'm brave without it, but if you think I need it,
sounds good to me.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Just in case.
I'm gonna knock it over or something. So I'm just gonna let the camera people have their picture. Okay. Hi, my name is Vincent Slatt. I'm the director of archiving at the Rainbow History Project. I volunteer, right? It's an all-volunteer group. We got started in the year 2000. Thank you to TJ and Bill for inviting us out here. We've known them a long time. But we're the local LGBT history group that works on history, arts, and culture of the greater DMV area, right? So we got started in 2000 because some of the elders were like thinking, where would we go to study our own history? And there was nowhere, right? No one was collecting anything about us, by us, for us, right? So not the Smithsonian, all these universities, the libraries, there was nothing. So they started by doing oral history projects, right, and getting the stories of the elders to be available for the youth. And from there it grew into more presentations, walking tours, but also an archive. So we now have about 250,000 pages in our archive. We collect from all kinds of individuals, but also from groups and associations. So we've got some paperwork from AGLA with the human rights cases that they did here in town, right? Not in your head, we've got some cases like that. That we got. We're about to get a whole collection on Atlantic Bell, Alexandria, which was one of the first telecoms in the area to really push LGBT access to internet services, late 80s, early 90s. So those gentlemen have a couple boxes at home for us. What I want to talk about though today is that World Pride is coming next year for June of 2025. Who has heard of that already? Okay, that part of the message is getting out, at least, right? So we as a history group, we're also going to have our 25th anniversary next year, and so we decided to do a massive exhibit, right? We had done one back in 2006. Pride, is it a party or a protest, right? Because you hear that back and forth all the time, like what is it really? And for those of us in community work, we're working all year long, so we kind of deserve that party come June, right? Except it seems like more work for us, right? Because now we're running around all month long and are you really going to record the whole thing? Okay.
You
all right.
said you would go away.
Yeah, I thought it would go away. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to show you kind of the research themes. We've been working on this exhibit now for about 7 or 8 months. So my researchers have kind of gone through and found some of the big themes that we're going to talk about in the exhibit. And then I'm going to invite you in for helping us with finding images, no photographs, testimonials, those firsthand accounts of the people who participated, organized, were part of pulling all this stuff off. So with that, I'm going to get started, but first by asking a question. Who has heard the line, Stonewall riots were the start of the modern Pride movement? Okay, who hadn't heard that line? Who thinks it might not actually be the start? There we go. Okay, so we are doing an exhibit called Pickets, Protests, and Parades, the history of gay pride in Washington. Okay, it is going to happen next year for the whole month of June. We're going to have it on display. It's going to be a public exhibit outside, right? So it's not going to show artifacts. It's going to be banners and things, just like your banner over here, weatherproofing kind of things. So what I'm going to walk you through today is kind of the exhibit themes that we have. And then based on the images that we get, the testimonials, we can kind of flesh those out into more and more panels, especially based on the money that we get, right? Because where did the money go is going to be a major thread. Based on the money and the space that we have. That's part of how exhibition design works. So we're really crowdsourcing right now kind of the three main components that we need. Do you have photographs or images from the time, right? The photos, magazines that have good images, posters, any of these kind of like visual arts that we'd want to use, because that's what you show in an exhibit, right? If you have anything for the archives, we're also collecting, we always are collecting. So we're not just collecting Pride materials, but anything that you may have. If it might not come to us, we can help you get it elsewhere. We're a small archive, and so we don't necessarily compete with other archives. We compete with the dumpsters. Right? Because people downsize and they throw our history away. People pass away in their home and it gets thrown away. So we had a community leader who passed away just recently. His homophobic brother inherited the apartment. Were we going to get the paperwork from him leading organizations in the 80s? Right? So we have to be sensitive to those things. We're always collecting for the archives. Hit us up. If we're not the right home for it, we'll help you find somebody who is, right? So we give kind of that referral service. We also have a massive oral history project where we're constantly trying to get the stories of elders and activists. If you led an organization, you did anything in our community, we want those stories, right? To learn about local DMV history and the LGBT movement all around. So that requires both elders to be recorded and also other people to do the actual interviews. Right? So those are ways that you can get involved. Everyone has a story and they're all pretty good, maybe. Okay, right? So our exhibit's going to be happening and that's really what we're asking for. If you want to, you can get in touch with us, info@rainbowhistory.org, or you can email me directly too. I'll give you my contact at the end. So what I'm going to share with you now are kind of the 10 research themes that we have and kind of lay the information out. So a lot of people think that Pride started with Stonewall, but in fact it was April 17, 1965. The first White House picket for homosexual rights was held. 10 members of the Mattachine Society of Washington picketed. Frank Kameny, Lily Vincennes, they were leaders in this movement. And Kameny had been kicked out of government service when they found out he was gay. He was fired in the 50s, he took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and he spent his life fighting on behalf of gay rights. So in the 60s, they start with these pickets, having public demonstrations, and they craft an intellectual framework for getting LGBTQ equal rights, right? The church said we're going to hell, the doctor said we're mentally ill, and the government said we're illegal, right? So if you want to change that, you need a plan for that. So true Washingtonian fashion, there's a white paper involved, right? So they start with this, and then they're going up to the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia every 4th of July to have what they call an annual reminder to remind the public that the promise of the Declaration of Independence has not been met for our community. So they're doing that every single year. It's the same place where the suffragettes went, where the abolitionists went, right? So tying our fight to freedom for those. In this area too is when they start having these events. Come 1969 and the Stonewall riots, when those occurred, The following week was the 1969 annual reminder, and there was a lot more people involved with it that year. And so then they end up deciding that the 1970 annual reminder was actually going to be the Christopher Street Liberation Day March. So rather than having the reminders at Philadelphia, they're going to go up to New York and have the reminders there, right? And so the local groups here, the Madison Society of Washington, really recognized the Stonewall riots as a kind of Boston Tea Party moment for pushing us forward, and good old DC style, like, we have a plan for that, right? And so they had this intellectual framework ready. The next era, really from 1970 to 1975, is this whole gay and proud movement that becomes, all across the globe, different gay liberation front groups start popping up, new organizations are created, everyone is coming out of the closet, not everyone, lots of people are, right, you're like, we weren't all right, and so more and more groups are coming out, people are starting to organize. You also have to remember at this time, it's intimately tied up with the Black Civil Rights Movement, with women's liberation movement, and the anti-Vietnam War, right? The anti-war movement is something that those of us who have lived through it will never fully understand, but this very, very militant and activist protest era is when all of this is going on. So in this period of 70 to 75, they have the May Day protests in DC, 1971. They took place, it was the largest police action ever. 15,000 people got arrested. Twice as many got beat up by the cops. It was a massive, massive anti-Vietnam rally. And in it, the Gay Liberation Front, the young gays who just come out were marching in force with banners and posters saying they're gay, they're proud, right? This era, gay is good, right? They had coined that term based on the successful Black is Beautiful, right? The Black Civil Rights Movement was having some serious successes in the 50s and the 60s, mobilizing the politics of respectability and new media and technologies, right? So they were very much using this, and so gay and proud is this era. Marching against Nixon's inauguration in 73. Banners, gays against Nixon, right? This whole era. And so during this time, the local area LGBT people are still going up to New York to help plan and participate in the Christopher Street Liberation Day parades. But come 1975, the Lambda Rising bookstore, which was founded by Deacon McCubbin, I see some people are recognizing it, they decided that activists were still going to go up to New York and we're still going to participate in those planning and events too. But what he said he wanted is something here to educate and entertain the locals. So they planned a block party right outside the Lambda Rising bookstore in DuPont Circle. And they expected maybe a couple dozen, maybe a couple hundred people would show up. And so they were lucky, everyone was late that day. But it began a period where for 5 years, right, imagine everyone was late, but they got hundreds of them. And this was really started having public activity here in DC, right? So with that 1975 Block Party, that's what everyone is going to be calling the 50th anniversary of Pride. I just showed you there was 10 really good years of Pride before that, right? And so in this era, they're having the Block Party there. They're starting also, all these different organizations are coming forward, right? Being created, information becomes essential. So they have all these booths handing out pamphlets and flyers and this kind of stuff. So when you think about kind of the global Pride movement and things, New York is really the ones that gave us this march and this rally and the political speeches. The Los Angeles people who couldn't come participate, they gave us parades with feather boas and glitter and music and joy, and the Washingtonians gave the info booth, right? Right? Here's a flyer, here's our pamphlet, join our organization. You've all been there, you were telling me you love the festival, right? So that info booth is Washington's great contribution to the global Pride movement. And I actually like it the most, right? Because that's what we need in organizing ourselves is good information. A librarian. So they run this for about 5 years or so, coming out of Lambda Rising bookstore. It's overgrown the block. It's overgrown the ability for a bookstore to manage a big community party, right? So they hand it off. Now what you're seeing in my slides here too, before I move on to the next one, I'm just giving a little bit of history. I don't even know if you can see in the back, because I'm trying to perfect this. A little bit of history, and then we have kind of these framing questions right, that my researchers have come up with, where we're trying to say, hey, we learned a little of this, now we have some questions, right? So with good exhibit design, we're going to be getting you to ask more questions than answer, right? And kind of hitting that education curriculum component is one of our strategies here. You'll also see, like, I've got one image, that's what I'm showing you now, but we are hoping to get some more images. So if you can find good stuff, if you know of somebody, if you can help us, going through the archives, the old magazines, all kinds of different things, that's how we're going to plug these in with images. Okay. Our next kind of big theme is the Third World Conference that took place. The National March on Washington in 1979 was at the 10th anniversary of Stonewall, and they pulled off this big march. There were some of the gay groups saying, no way, don't do it, and some of the gay groups saying, yes, we got to do this, right? If we march on Washington and nobody shows up, it's going to show them that we're not very much and we're not very strong. But if we do it, they will show up and they'll see how strong and powerful we are, right? So a real big scary part right there for having this march. Well, at the Howard University up in New York, up on Georgia Avenue in DC, they held a massive conference called the Third World Conference, right? So that term might not sound very politically correct right now, but that was what we would now call, you know, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color. And so they held this big conference up there, a lot of intellectuals, a lot of intersections of different rights struggles. We're having this march about gay rights, but we also need to talk about women's rights, Black rights, xenophobia, racism, misogyny, the intersection of all of these things. It's this big Third World Conference they had. And then when they were done, they marched down Georgia Avenue carrying big banners, you know, Black and gay. I'm as proud of my gayness as I am my blackness. That was one of their touch phrases, right? So we got some great images from that. And once we started doing this, the actual photographer has come forward. She's been photographing for like 50 some odd years, and her house is full of really great stuff. So she's been digging through and she found this necklace. So we're like, yay! It's also going to give us that opportunity to like show the images that a Black lesbian took. Right? And her using her camera is a little different than other people using their camera. So it's part of how we're trying to center this exhibit in the eyes and voices of the people that were there. Okay? So we're really excited about that. We've got some great radio recordings from the conference as well. But this group of Black gays going down Georgia Avenue is really our first gay pride parade in DC, you know, within the whole area. And so it's kind of phenomenal that it's actually Black gays making that march, right? Because we're going to talk about some of those race relations as well. So after that big march happens, from the period 1980 to 1986, Pride is run by a group called the Peace Street Festival Incorporated. It's gotten too big for Deacon to run out of the bookstore, so now there's its own group, right? Any of you that create new groups or close down other groups, you realize the finances are always what gets involved, right? So in this area, we have our first Pride Parade in 1991, but come 1983, the first Black person, the first lesbian to run Pride was Carleen Cheatham, first woman as well, and she ran it. She also incorporated an AIDS vigil into the Pride festivities, right? Because AIDS has now reared its head by 1983, and the role of AIDS with Pride becomes very, very important. This is also the era where Carleen kind of kicks off what becomes known a little bit as lesbian leadership during the AIDS crisis, right? It's pretty well known. A lot of people talk about or mention all of these matriarchs that were doing a lot of the heavy work, but it's pretty understudied, right? So this area here, it's the day at the beach because things were held at the Peace Street Beach, right? That's where the Pride festivities were, but it certainly was not a life at the beach.
And I have an excerpt from this time.
Oh, wonderful.
So here is Pride, thought at the Pride Festival in 1984. I'm just the shape of a lambda, very patriotic looking thing, but the 80s were very patriotic. The other thing I would add
Love the history.
is
Can we see it over here?
that in your deeper conversation about the 80s, it's important to mention for DC that the previous mayor, Walter Washington, was very unsupportive of the LGBTQ community,
And it was the new mayor right at this time, as the parade started, that actually got elected. Controversial later, but at this time, he sort of was the hero, Marion Barry, and he got elected with the gay support, and he marched, as he became mayor, he marched in that very first Pride Parade. It was one of the few Pride parades that had the mayor leading the parade.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. So we're going to have these different threads that go through all of these things, looping it together, and one of them is this political participation. So in this area here with Deacon and the bookstore, it also began this era of having questionnaires for the politicians, right? Ratings and endorsements and things. And some of the questions from this time period in the late 70s, would you support a gay pride resolution of the city council? That was actually a question for candidate endorsements because a lot of them didn't, right? So that actually takes me up to this era in here, 86, 87. We have this new march, and we're gonna do this entire section here called The Dawn of a New Era of Pride Politics. By this time, like to Bill's point, by this time the gay community is really starting to flex its muscle in the political arena. So we're gonna match it in both at the national level, right, with demanding AIDS funding from the federal government, but also here at the local level in the area too, with repeal of sodomy laws, police brutality, especially the high heel race, it was really bad, and then some of the discrimination cases that are going on in the counties around us as well. So for instance, this was an era where the sodomy laws, they failed at the attempt to repeal them. So we replaced the council members, right? And then we got them repealed. And so that's a type of politics, right? That comes up with pride. They're like, oh, it was a march, oh, it's a rally. It's also election day, right? So this whole area is gonna hit in with this. And then since we're in the 90s, we move into what we're calling the evolution of visibility, right? More and more groups come forward, more and more different groups. We have trans pride wants to have trans events. Bisexuals want more bisexual events. We start seeing the rollout Latino pride, special youth pride events for the kids. We have silver pride for the retirees comes up. Like all of these new groups being created in this era here. We also have DC Black Pride, which gets founded in 1991. Has anyone ever heard the question, why do they have to have a separate pride? You've heard this, come on, you've heard this. You're in the DMV, you've heard people ask about why there's a separate Black Pride. Well, a big part of that we're going to discuss in here too, was that with all of that AIDS activity around Pride, all of that fundraising for AIDS and AIDS services, was it being equitably distributed?
No.
Right?
I don't
right?
think so.
Right? Were the black and brown people getting the share or what their needs were? Right? So it came up with a thing of like, hey, let's have our own, right? Fundraisers and supporting our own groups, right? And so these things kind of evolved, and that's where the heritage of DC Black Pride actually comes from AIDS fundraising for their needs as well. So we're gonna hit a lot of this in this evolution area. And the 90s are pretty messy actually, because we got presidential politics, evolution of visibility, and we got main streets going on. So there's a lot of big change in the Pride movement in the 1990s. So if you think of our pickets in the 60s, the first prides in the 70s, right, AIDS crisis in the 80s, come the 90s we see a lot more too. And the Pride festivities moved from being a DuPont Circle and down onto being on Pennsylvania Avenue, the so-called Main Street of America. So now it's boom, right in the government's face. That second group had already gone out of business with the 1993 March on Washington. So now it's being run by the 1 in 10 Arts and Culture group and the Whitman Walker Clinic, which is the largest AIDS service provider in DC. So these two groups are running it as a culture festival, as a fundraiser, okay? But it's also when we're seeing a lot of people doing, wasn't called intersectionality then, but that's the word we use now, right? So we have lesbians participating in abortion rights rallies. We have the Asians and Friends, gay Asian groups participating in Lunar New Year, right? The gay Latino groups March and Fiesta DC, you know, participating, proud of being Latino and proud of being gay. This image here is from the Million Man March in 1995. Anybody heard of that? Remember that? Right? Large contingent of gay black men participating in a black men's march, right? Proud of my gayness as I am my blackness. So we kind of came up with this concept of, hey, people are being proud in multiple spaces, right? This is also going to give us kind of our big opportunities for looking at parades and saying, hey, we have all of these church groups, proud to be church and to be gay, right? We've got all these arts groups, right? We've got all these different ethnicities, different employment areas, right? So this kind of area of coming out across America, right, and being, gay in multiple spaces is okay, right?
Have you reached out to anyone from the Friends meeting of Washington about there? Because I was told your meeting house, there was one of the few places where they would hold memorials for AIDS victims. And
Yes, I don't know anyone there, but I'd love for you to help.
Yes.
The Friends Meeting House of Washington also hosted the night before the 1993 March on Washington. They held a Gay Asian conference. It's the first conference of gay Asians known to take place in America. It was held there, including a special session for gay Asian women, which is very unheard of back then for Asian lesbians to be organizing, but that happened at that Friends Meeting House.
you and I will talk.
Let's talk about it soon, because this is it. We need people helping out. So this era here, 95 to 2008, really with this Main Streets concept, where we're talking about being in your community, being out, how Pride looks a little differently all across the region, okay? We move on then, in the year 2008, Capitol Pride is still being run by the Whitman Walker Clinic. I think this is when I first met you two. In this era when I started volunteering with Pride, in 05, 06, 07, and they started doing what was called a community planning committee, right? And having all of the community agencies coming forward, representing their own groups, community partners, planning all of this. So in 2008, they were like, okay, we're ready to hand off the operations and responsibility for Capitol Pride, and that's when the Capitol Pride Alliance took over. And they're the group still operating Pride festivities to this day. CPA, or the Capitol Pride Alliance. This is also this new era, right? We've got a new president, had a big Millennium March. We're post-racial America. Right? Work with me, you remember the rhetoric, right? So in this era here from 2008 to 2020, right, we gotten a lot of our victories within the LGBTQ community. We have a lot that we didn't yet win in those areas. It's nice to have a rainbow colored White House. You think back to our pickets from 1965, they wouldn't even talk to those 10 gays. Well, it was 9 gays and 1 straight woman picketing outside of the nice heaven out, right? Until now having it turned rainbow color, right? So a lot of things have come on. We're also in this area going to get into some of the stuff that might seem more familiar because it's more recent history, but also talking about the Black Lives Matter, right? With the Ferguson uprising that takes place in 2014. Moving on, the previous administration, with them getting involved. But there was also this whole movement called No Justice, No Pride, where people were really looking at, how can we be taking checks from some... You said it, I'm being recorded, but Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, these are major, they make weapons to kill people, right? Wells Fargo, who made their money off genocide of indigenous people in the 19th century, and are funding pipelines that run through indigenous territory now, and they have a float, right? So these are some real questions that activists are bringing to the table. We're also going to have to hit one of these main threads, which is, where did all the money go, right? If you're going to have a massive Pride event, largest single-day event in the nation's capital, someone's paying for it, right? Those are a lot of trash cans on the side of the road, a lot of police bills and ambulances, right? So it's not as easy as, why are you taking in money, right? Also a lot of questions around the cops. It was in the paper recently, why are the cops in the parade? Can they be, should they be? Right? If Stonewall was a riot with the police are raiding gay bars, why are we letting them in the parade? Should we not? Right? So some of these big questions that happen in the 20-teens, we're really going to delve into here. And again, it's not going to be us explaining them, but rather using some of the words and the questions that people asked at the time. And that'll take us kind of into our last theme I wanted to present for you. And that's about the role of our vice president right now. We see during the massive epidemic and how things changed very radically for us in 2022 and moving forward. We have a vice president who wanted there to be a march when she was in office and marched down the streets of the Capitol, jumps up on the stage at the Capitol Pride Festival and gives like a really rallying cry speech to the activists about keep up the good work, I'm on your side, you know, that's not done. It's very different than it was 60 years ago at those White House pickets, right? So we're gonna talk about that. It's still open-ended, because we don't know who our vice president is in 2025. We will figure that out soon enough. But that's gonna be kind of how we ended up at this massive World Pride Festival that is next year. So again, you see we're asking for your images and your help. That kind of gets me
Kamala has had the different drummers band at her home twice this year. So you should look in, if you're going to tell that story about what she's been doing, they've performed there twice.
Yeah.
Once was like a week ago.
I should get them to take me next time. Right? So that kind of gets me tonight. Thank you everybody for listening. If you've got any questions, I'm all ears.
I'm going to come back. I brought a bunch of historical things, T-shirts from not just the Pride parades here in Washington, but also in New York. There's and the national marches that were here. And I have my freedom readings from the 90s. You can see what those look like and an age-written little pin. And some other T-shirts from some of the other organizations, including one I wore when I was a producer of a gay TV show. It says I Access Fairfax. It was produced out of the cable access channel out in Fairfax County. So, but it was a DC oriented show. So it's all these reps are back here for you to look at.
I remember in 2022 Pride Fest, I remember Kamala Harris getting on the stage, and it was a great speech.
Great. Yeah.
And then another memory I have is going to on the day after gay marriage was legalized in 2015. I went to the New York Pride Parade. I grew up in southwestern Connecticut, so about 40 minutes from New York City. So I went to the parade, and I managed to get a spot near the reviewing stand. And I remember Senator Schumer giving a short, invigorating speech at the end of at the reviewing stand.
Great, thanks. Yeah, a lot of politicians can jump up and be great allies at the moment, so it's important when they do.
Can you talk more about the society that you mentioned that starts with an M in the first line?
The Madison Society of
Yes.
Washington. So the Madison Society was founded actually in Los Angeles in the 40s as a group of gays who were like self-supporting, and they started to kind of coalesce around the idea that we have our own culture, right? We are our own people. We should have our own identity. Prior to that, same-sex activity was just considered, perverted and straight person, right? And so they really came together with this thought that we are our own people, we should organize. So the Madison Society had gotten started out in California, and they started with a couple times of like fighting back when they got arrested, right? Helping each other, pooling resources for those court cases and stuff like that. Frank Kameny got kicked out of the military. He had been in the military and went on to become a PhD in astronomy. This is the 1950s, where the space race against the Soviets, what we really needed was astronomers, right, to get us to the moon. But they fired him when they found out he was gay. He was at the U.S. Army map-making service as a civilian, but they fired him, and therefore he couldn't get a security clearance. Therefore he couldn't get any jobs in astronomy. So he founded the Madison Society of Washington, the local branch of this group. And one of the first things he did was he took his case to the Supreme Court, saying there should be nothing illegal about being gay. And so he started this movement here locally. Lily Vincennes, who just passed away last summer, she had been kicked out of the Army. One of her roommates or her mates in the barracks thought that she was lesbian, turned her in. So she was the first woman to join Madison Society. And they really started working on coming up with some of the research ideas. What is really the case here? We should fight back with the government. Who's willing to do that? who's willing to come out and, you know, if you got caught, you probably were doing something illegal, immoral, unethical, all of these things. So who's willing to go on record, right? And so they started this activity really in the early 60s. And the Mattachine Society was highly influenced by the Black Civil Rights Movement, right? The politics of respectability in the 1960s. The 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, that was, you know, where MLK gave his famous speech. It was run by Bayard Rustin, an out gay black man. This was extremely successful use of modern media, right? Getting the message out there, embracing the radio, the television, and things. So the Mattachine Society took on these ideas as well, and we're working with other groups in other cities. The Daughters of Bilitis was founded in California, a lesbian-run organization that had similar and different goals and strategies. There was another one in Philadelphia called the Janus Society, Janus, and Mattachine Society in New York. So they started having these conferences in the late 60s. You know, they even met up in the Midwest so that some of the Western groups could come. They had East Coast organizations. So really starting to network across the different cities, writing good pamphlets, sharing information. Barbara Giddings was one of the leaders. She made a bibliography of like good books that you should read. Like instead of just reading books that say that we're all these bad things, like here's some books, here's some actual research that we want you to read, right? So compiling and getting those resources together. That was what the Mattachine Society really started and was doing effectively. So then they start with these pickets in the 60s, and come 1971, Frank Kameny runs for office in DC as the first time DC is able to elect a delegate to Congress. He runs as the personal freedom candidate, and some of his campaign staff end up forming the GLAA, Gay and Lesbian Activists Alliance, which was founded out of his campaign, and he went on to serve and fight valiantly. He did get invited into Obama's Oval Office and got an apology from John Barry, who was the out head of OPM, the Office of Personnel Management. So by the time Frank died, the head of the civil service was an out gay man. So right? So he got an apology from the out gay head of the civil service for having fired him back in the 50s. So it took him a long time to get that apology, but he did get it. And so he was able to see Obama sign domestic partnership benefits for federal employees, and some of these other great successes. Frank actually ended up dying on National Coming Out Day. So kind of a nice day to go. Did I get you some of that Mattachine stuff there? We have a bunch of their magazines and things digitized in our online catalog. Their big book, their big magazine was called The Homosexual Citizen. And they wrote a lot of different things in there. It was off for, you could order it in the mail, things like that. It was really writing the articles.
Yeah, so much of what happened from the 60s and 70s on, at least in this area, was focused in DC proper. But starting in the 80s, both in Maryland and in Northern Virginia, in the suburbs, there were sort of echoes of that, but sort of a different dynamic. And I know the Rainbow History Project has begun to collect some of those stories. But I'm wondering, is there a place for any of that to flavor into this, in that it was a very different dynamic dealing with sort of a suburban issue versus a metro issue?
Yes, yes. There is plenty of space for all of that. So we do history of the DMV, and you're right, the local context makes a big difference. So GLAA was founded in DC, but AGLA was founded in Arlington, and then the Suburban Maryland Gay Lesbian Activist Alliance was created in Montgomery County. And so we have the records from them and their fight to get equal rights ordinances passed in Montgomery County, right? We're trying to get some Prince George's County related records to go with those other sets, but it's a hard pull. We also recognize that the city is not, we also recognize that the city is not divorced from the surroundings, right? We live and go back and forth between them. You know, I live there, but I came here, right? And so there's space for all of that in our archiving, in our collections, but also in the exhibit. In terms of like the local political differences, you're right. DC, we don't have a governor or a state house to deal with. like you do here, or like Maryland has to. So the political landscape looks very different, but a lot of the strategies for getting the equal rights and for fighting the battles has remained the same. Yeah. Plenty of space for it. We know you're at it. Let me know what you got.
Have you reached out to the Delta at all?
No.
The gate for the year towards the president went down in DC in 1986 with the first chapter because someone on campus had been denied the opportunity to play because they were gay. And I'm an alumnus brother, but that's just they are still headquartered in DC, and so I will.
Perfect project. Perfect project. This is also a great example of how with RHP we're all volunteers all in our free time. So whenever people come forward with information, idea, projects, connections, we're like, great, come on, you can do that with us, right? Because, I mean, that's kind of the nature of how it goes with doing this kind of volunteer work. So everything goes as long as we got somebody to do it, right?
For some of the local flavor, it'd be interesting to see more about sort of the cultural differences in the different localities. Because I know when we were putting together Quality Arlington, I was having conversations with different like LGBT leaders in the county. And I talked to Jay Bissett, who was the first openly gay member of I think any locality in Virginia, and his mentality was very much like I didn't want like a queer liaison office. Like I wanted Arlington to accept the queer community, and we don't need separate spaces. Like we don't need gay bars. I want all bars to accept, queer people, and that's a very different mentality than a lot of other folks. And I feel like that's shaped a lot in Arlington. Why potentially we have less.
It's a very DMV approach. I'm not going to deny, and the two sides of the coin comes up all the time, especially you'll see it in talking about the Smithsonian. Why should we have a Smithsonian African American Museum? Why should we have a Smithsonian Women's or a Smithsonian Latino Museum? We have an American history museum, right? Black history, women's history, Latino history, it's American history, right? Even now they're talking about having a Smithsonian LGBT museum. Of course, we'll talk about for 100 years before we get it, right? I mean, it took 100 years to get the African American museum. It was pitched as an idea in 1915, and it opened to the public in 2015. So for some people, it happened too quickly, and for some of us, it happened too slowly. But, do we fit in the large thing, or do we have our own? It's not just Mr. Facette, but a lot of people have that very same question. And a lot of times it's about visibility, right, which can be better where. And sometimes it's very kind of subterraneous. So what we did with the Rainbow History Project, in fact, is rather than having our own archive museum building, having our own storage to make things available, fundraising for rent and having a staff and an electric bill and all those kind of things, we put all of our archival collections into the DC History Center, right? And we have turned them gay, like very gay. So we are now the largest collection that they have, the most frequently accessed collection they have. It used to be about 10,000 pages or so when I got involved. It's now 250,000, right? That is a lot of gay paper, right? But anyone who wanted to go or see these Arlington human rights ordinances that we collected would be able to go in there and see that. We chose that group because we're like, oh, they did a local history. We want to be part of the local story, right? So we turned them gay, right? Like we've turned a lot of bars gay, but we've lost some things by not having our own, right? Which is the joy and the sorrow of ending the, segregation and some of those things. You get something and you lose something. So.
Sure. Because there's been this conversation I've had with a number of friends over the years about, yes, we love that Pride experiences are open and people can attend them, but feeling like even if there's like the cost of like a $5 ticket to attend a Pride event or like a festival or like a block party, it feels like it's a more coherent queer space than it is just like, oh great, like everyone in the straight event has come to this parade and it's like great, like this is great, it's open, but it's not as like just like queer concentrated.
Yeah. So I have gotten some feedback. A lot of the leather communities, the Levi and biker groups, no longer feel welcome at Pride events because a lot of the face painting for children and PTA moms and school contingents have a very different definition of what's appropriate at a pride parade or a pride festival than what the leather daddies think they should be able to do at a pride event, right? So some things change and some consider themselves in and some not.
Out of curiosity, have you been in touch with Freddie's Beach Bar?
Yes, talked to Freddie earlier this season, yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Love it.
Vincent, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what the Rainbow History Project is collecting by way of information from various media, like newspapers, TV programs. For example, and maybe Bill can speak to this, Gay Fairfax is something that was around. There isn't anything like that now. There hasn't been anything like that for several years. But it was history making within itself. So do you guys keep those as well?
Yeah, so one of the difficult things about history, especially with a community archive and under documented groups, is not everyone makes as much paper as other people, right? So in our archive, it's lawyers sure make a lot of paperwork, right? But if you work at a gay bar, or if you're an actress or a performer, you know, there's less of a paper trail for you in your existence. That's just part of what it looks like. So we do collect organizational records. It used to be the case that there would be newsletters, agendas and minutes of the board, right? Flyers, mailings, all this kind of stuff, palm cards even. A lot of that stuff we don't make anymore because everything's gone digital. Okay, so we do still collect a lot of that paper and we're getting it all the time, which is great. In terms of audio-visual material, that's extremely expensive to take care of, right? Nowadays it's all on the phone, that kind of digital stuff, but we do take broadcasts. We have a radio show called The Friends Radio from 1974 to 1983. It was broadcast first out of WGTB and later out of WPFW. It had a massive reach through the area, way past Richmond even. And it was LGBT radio. By us, about us, for us. One of the founders of that group ended up having the reels saved in his basement for 20 years, and is one of the founders of Rainbow History Project. So gave us all of these phenomenal recordings. We spent a ton of time and energy fundraising to get it digitized. So we have that now digitally available. With some of the more modern shows, like Gay Fairfax is digitized. We've got it on DVD because they did it themselves. But 1 in 10, which was related producers, we have that. We digitize it ourselves because we got the reels from it. So we digitize that and put it online. Right. So we're constantly collecting that kind of thing. Photographs also. We take in albums or in entire shots, all that stuff. So we don't really turn anything away. We like to look at it and review and decide. When it comes to artifacts, though, like three-dimensional objects, those are extremely difficult and extremely expensive to take care of and preserve. So we have very few of those. So-and-so's flag from such and such a march, you know, everybody's got a flag, right? Right, with one thing or another. But we had in the 1971 with the May Day protest, we were talking about the banners for the Gay Liberation Front. Yes. Well, we will take care of a 50-year-old banner, right? We can do that kind of thing. So we assess every item, you know, item by item when it comes in terms of 3D objects. Other ones that you mentioned. Yeah, so AV, photo, paper, 3D. Does that hit everything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more question. Storage of that probably costs a lot of money. Just wondering, has anyone thought about working with maybe the Smithsonian, as if they could also help you in that regard?
Yeah, we have relationships. And you have family too, so you know relationships can vary. But like one of the reasons when our group was looking for where we should put our archive, like if we go to Smithsonian, we become a really, really tiny fish in a really, really, really big pond, right? And the same with the Library of Congress. Like if we go in there, we don't get that kind of experience and you don't get that attention that you get at a smaller place. So that's kind of how we've looked at it over the years. We have friendships with some of the staff, some of them volunteer. In fact, one lady that works at American History is now volunteering with us and actually working with our whole textile collection. Because we've gotten a lot of t-shirts over the years, and they're wonderful, they're wonderful. But they are very difficult to take care of and maintain and that kind of stuff. So we're able to work with them in those ways. And most of our papers go to the DC History Center, but we do have some other storage for larger and 3D things that we still don't really have a permanent home for, but we're taking care of them for now.
Do you have any particular holy grails you're looking for, like an artifact you hope you can find, or a paper you hope exists, or someone you'd love to talk to? Like, do you have something that keeps you up that you hope to cross that you have?
Not a single thing, but there's some really good ones we're looking for. We have a yellow beret. The Black Panthers in the early 70s hosted a radical people's constitutional convention. Right, so you can edit the Constitution by making an amendment, getting it ratified by a bunch of states, or you can hold a people's convention. So the Black Panthers were like, let's have a convention, let's change some stuff, right? So they had a whole meeting up at Temple University in Philadelphia, and they had changed and made big statements about gay liberation and women's liberation being integral to the Black Panthers and the Black liberation movement. So a bunch of the local LGBT people went up to march in, and the Black Panthers were known for their black beret, right? Like, it's iconic when you think of it. So the LGBT guys, the gay guys all marched in with rainbow berets, right? Every color of the rainbow knitted in, with the berets. So when I joined our group, we had this yellow beret. And I'm like, why do we have a yellow yarn beret? It looks like my grandma's crocheting. What is this about, right? Like, why do we have a yellow one? So eventually found kind of the paperwork from the guy who gave it to us, and he gave us the oral history, kind of explaining that when they did this, they all marched in, they crocheted, berets in different colors of the rainbow. They marched in. The Chicano contingent wore brown berets, right? And they marched in and they did the limp rest, rather than a full-on Black Panther rest. They did it really limp, but nobody got the joke, right? I'm like, I don't know, maybe somebody was laughing at you. But that goes kind of towards that white whale of what I love. I've got one yellow beret, and I have the story of them. Of course, I love one in every color. He said there was only 50 in their contingent, so what did those other 49 dudes do with their berets? Who knows? But I love to get a beret like that coming forward. In terms of politicians and stuff like that, not so much. Right now I'm looking for some awesome pictures of the Dyke March from 1993. The night before the March on Washington in 1993, our local dykes hosted the first Dyke March in America. Prior to that, dykes had marched, and prior to that, marching dykes had called themselves dykes, but this was the first time they called it a Dyke March. And it was about 20,000 or so dykes through the streets of DC. They are rumored to have been carrying a massive vagina over their heads, right? So I want a picture for the exhibit, right? In order to tell the story, I want that kind of a picture, like a really iconic one. Like with dykey dykes, looking dykey. Even better if they've got a rainbow flag, right? Or a sign that calls themselves dykes, or carrying that massive vagina in front of the White House. Something like that. So I'm really looking for these iconic image kind of things. In doing this research just this week, someone found that there was a documentary made about the Dyke March, and it's called Lesbian Avengers Swallow Fire Too. And it's got some pictures. Apparently, these lesbian Avengers during the Dyke March were swallowing fire from the White House. Whoa. Fire-breathing dykes. That's kind of like the perfect picture, right? So we kind of have some of those wish lists. I hope I can find them. Little things, and this exhibit is pulling up a lot of those ideas.
So, what are you doing to reach out to people who might have moved out? Is there such a volatile area?
Give them a call.
So what can we do? We have giants TJ who knows tons of people.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So we want them. That's why when TJ asked me to come speak, I was like, absolutely, right? I will come. And that's part of it. Is we need people that have the big Rolodex and the big checkbook to be part of this project, opening up, begging off the cobwebs and finding who's still around and who was part of what and who has what. That's a big part of it. But we also need the younger activists to do a lot of the work, right? I've heard a bunch of good ideas today, but like my place full. My fact on Thanksgiving full, right? Right? But if we could get more people helping and getting involved, like it's a community effort, right? Doing this exhibit, but also our work. So we can help you interviewing each other, you know, all this kind of stuff. It's going to be in June of 2025.
No, where?
Where? Downtown DC.
You have like a place?
We have put out a permit, but it's not been approved yet, so we're waiting on news from the government. Right. We're hoping like House Republicans don't cause us any grief.
Oh no, it's
Right, because it is DC and
we have to do everything in our capacity to make a blue wave.
where I live is like 95% Democrat, so I'm worried about you guys.
You're trying to find some place outdoors on federal property. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're putting a permit for it. Yeah.
You know, back to the topic, I know that Stonewall is considered the first gay riot, but actually, like a lot of the bunch of history books I've read, there was actually a much smaller scuffle of some sort that had taken place a year or two earlier. I don't remember the city or what it was about, but it was like, you know, it involves people, cops, that kind of thing.
Oh, even LA wants to claim it that one of their bar in Silver Lake or somewhere.
Yeah, there was. It was actually, they discussed it on NPR this week.
Yeah.
The Compton Cafeteria. I think it was today's episode actually. The Compton Cafeteria in San Francisco. There was an uprising there. It's in like the Tarleton district, and so there was an uprising at that cafeteria that night. So they had also fought back against it. Against the police brutality. There were some other minor skirmishes here or there, right? Like, a lot of times people fought back with police brutality, right? What was unique about Stonewall, however, is that it was multiple nights in a row, right? The cops came back for another night, and the neighbors all came out to be part of it. They didn't give up so easily, right? Frank Kameny with Madison Society, in a good documentary called Gay Pioneers, he talks about it too, that, you know, it didn't start with Stonewall, it actually started with the Pickets and the media campaign they've been doing. He's like, so these people had already been exposed to the idea of publicly presenting yourself and demanding change. He's like, so we've been laying the groundwork for this for a couple of years. We had been advertising and putting up flyers for these annual reminders, so that was already kind of known in the air when Stonewall happened, right? So it didn't happen exactly in a vacuum, but it did, and because the news got out so widely and so broadly, it really captivated the whole country, the gay communities across the whole country. And that's part of what made Stonewall unique as opposed to some of the other things that happened. I think we're gonna let that be our last question now, unless you have one.